gotten some puzzled looks about this sermon this week. What is she going to say about redemption, you're wondering? What use is that concept for universalists? Redemption? And that sermon description, a sermon about sin and deliverance, UU style. Lord have mercy. What kind of sins is she talking about? Is she going to tell us what to do? Like that Baptist minister in Las Vegas, Nevada, who recommends that his parishioners wear a sin visor when driving through town to block out the billboards. Not a sun visor, friends, a sin visor. What do you think? Maybe we could sell those to help out with the capital campaign. Only in Vegas. Talk about being disconnected from the world around you, though. That minister literally wanted his people to wear blinders. That's not what this sermon's about. This sermon is about being in the world and being of it, but also recognizing that part of ourselves that is more than meets the eye. There's an old-fashioned definition of sinning as breaking a rule. And since you are Unitarian Universalists and you don't believe in strict religious kinds of rules, maybe you don't believe in sin. Or you might think that sin means feeling guilty. And since you felt guilty enough in your life, thanks to my mother, your mother, or your childhood religion, you'll pass on that theological concept. Thank you very much. I'm just teasing. I love my mom. That stuff all has to do with the kind of sin we hear about from conservative Christians. The kind that happens when you break the Ten Commandments, for example. Do we even know the Ten Commandments? What are they? Let's see if you know them. UUs, what are they? Call them out. Honor your father and mother. Honor the Sabbath. No other gods. Sabbath. Don't kill. Don't covet. Don't steal. False witness. Adultery. Yeah. Let's see. Coveting, witness, steal, adultery, murder. Did anybody say that one? Don't take God's name in vain. That's the other one. Now, the Catholic Church, never to be outdone by God, did one better and came up with the 7 deadly sins, too. Do you know those? What are they? I think you do know them, yeah. Lust, lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. I think I heard all of those just now. And each sin has an additional deadly sin, Anne says. Oh my. Okay. Every person. All right, she's going to do a sermon sometime, she says. Sounds good. In Dante Alighieri's classic poem, The Inferno, the main character, Dante, descends into the 9 circles of hell, 4 of which bear these names. And he's creative with the punishments that they reap. There are Francesca and her brother-in-law, Paolo, who in life were reading a story of Lancelot and King Arthur. Those would have been practically hot off the presses back then. When a romantic scene in the story inspired them to kiss, and they began to desire each other. In Dante's Inferno, they're doomed to be blown about, suspended in the air by hot hurricane winds for all eternity. If lust is going to be punished in the afterlife, somehow a tempest seems fitting. Passion can be stormy. But they're only in the 2nd circle of the Inferno, which is not so bad compared to what comes later. They're just right behind the 1st circle, which is filled with people who were good in life, but who were born before Christianity or who were never baptized. Dante has the Greek philosophers there. It's a pretty merciless story. In the deepest, worst circle of the Inferno is Judas, who betrayed Jesus. His punishment is to be gnashed for all eternity in the teeth of Lucifer, right between Brutus and Cassius. They led the assassination of Julius Caesar. I told you it was creative. It's gutsy, too. In the 8th circle, just before Judas, the character of Dante runs into Boniface, who was still actually the Pope in real life in the year in which the Inferno takes place. Dante placed a living Pope in the 8th circle of hell. There are only 9 circles. Dante and Boniface did not get along. But there's one scene that especially stood out to me, and that's the one in which Dante encounters Fra Alberigo and Branca Doria, who are, he discovers, still alive, but already in hell. They're still walking the earth, and yet they're already in hell, too, because they're living with a great deal of regret. Kind of like the character of Dante himself, who experiences this tour of the Inferno by way of a midlife crisis. He awakens from a strange nap and is led into the Inferno by the ghost of the woman he loved all his life, Beatrice, whom he never told how he felt. She died an early death before he could overcome his shyness, and he never got over it. In real life, unrequited love and yearning was Dante Alighieri's hell, and it spurred him to spiritual transformation and to writing his epic poems, which would become classics of the Western world. The kind of hell we can experience while we're still walking the earth is the one kind of hell that still squares with Unitarian Universalism. It's not always linked with sin, but it sure can be if we reimagine sin not as breaking a rule or 2 or 3, depending on the party you attend, but as doing what diminishes us and is an offense to our fullness as human beings. Sin is not breaking a rule, but doing what diminishes us and is an offense to our fullness as human beings. It is, as the writer and minister Forrest Church wrote, anything that divides us against our better selves or estranges us from our neighbors or severs us from our ground of being. There was a curious study published about 1.5 years ago. It was done through the University of Aberdeen in Scotland. Researchers there delved into a database of everybody who was born in the United Kingdom in a single week in 1958. The database came from a huge study that was done at that time. It followed all of the babies born that week. When those children were 7, 11, and 16 years old, 3 different times in their childhoods, their parents and teachers filled out questionnaires about them, including questions about their behavior. Did they lie, cheat, or steal? Were they withdrawn or anxious? Were they mean to other children? And then, when the group was 45 years old, about 8,500 of them were followed up with once more. And one of the questions they were asked at that time was whether they had recently had any aches or pains that lasted a month or more. It turned out that the people who had been flagged for bad behavior at all 3 checks as children were twice as likely to suffer from chronic, widespread pain as adults. Is it, as the study's authors suggest, a disruption in the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis? Or karma? You be the judge. You're going to behave yourselves better after this, and so am I. Not all adults in chronic pain were bad kids, of course. Only about 1 in 20, the study says. A very curious study. I'm pretty sure we should not draw any theological conclusions from it, but it's a curious thing. We are complicated creatures, human beings. We're animals, and we do behave like them, eating, sleeping, reproducing, and not infrequently behaving as though it were a dog-eat-dog world and we were dog-eating dogs. But we also have this extraordinary love-hungry, meaning-hungry side of ourselves, the part of us that needs more than bread alone to get by. This side of ourselves will not settle for an unthinking life, or a life in which we ignore our inner moral compasses, or in which we ignore that inner voice, not the one that sounds like a mother, but the one that sounds like your heart of hearts speaking to you. That voice. That's the voice that knows what it really is to worship an idol. It knows that to worship an idol has nothing to do with golden calves or jealous gods, but is about ascribing ultimate worth to something that is not, in fact, worthy. To worship an idol is to ascribe ultimate worth to something that is not worthy. It isn't always a conscious choice. Often we would not say that we are worshiping the idol, but our actions reveal that we live as though we worship it. Take money, for example. How many of us live as though money were our idol, amassing objects that we don't need, that are arranged like accidental shrines to materialism around our homes, working as hard as we can and strategizing to get more and more money? And the harder we work, the more money we spend trying to comfort ourselves because we work so hard, and around and around and around. My family's familiar with this. Money is definitely the idol of American culture. We see it everywhere we look. It guides public policy and business practices. Can you even imagine big businesses being guided by something other than money? What if they were guided by a sense of mission that was grounded in mutuality and community and the well-being of the earth? And their main financial goal was sustainability. Crazy, right? Naive, even to think about it. Or how about power? Power can be an idol we worship. It may subtly or not so subtly guide our actions. We may find ourselves pursuing power in our careers without asking ourselves if the trade-offs are really worth it, or if it's what we really want. Or we may find ourselves wielding power in relationships, engaging in power struggles and standoffs that have little to do with our true feelings about another person, but are about our pride, our aversion to concessions, and our desire to maintain the upper hand. Addiction is another idol. We can live as though alcohol or painkillers or drugs were our gods, sacrificing everything else, piece by piece, drop by drop, in service to the addiction. It may take on a life of its own and take all of our inner strength and resources and support networks and care to break free from that. It isn't always a conscious choice, but our innermost selves know when we've gone astray in these ways, and it diminishes us and it causes us pain over time. And yes, even physical pain. And that innermost self feels it when we diminish ourselves in smaller ways, too, when we give in to or indulge in negative self-talk, when we abuse our bodies by trading nourishment and motion for empty calories and passive entertainment, when we withhold nourishment from our spirits and minds by feeding them only mindless garbage, and when we diminish ourselves by staying in relationships that tear us down and drain our energy and make us feel unworthy. The word deliverance means extrication from danger or imprisonment. Extrication from danger or imprisonment. When we are mesmerized or caught up or imprisoned by the things or the patterns or the relationships that diminish us, we are in spiritual danger and we need deliverance. We need to find a way to extricate ourselves from that, maybe with a little help. When we are weighed down with feelings of regret and guilt, we're imprisoned then too, but we can be liberated through forgiveness of ourselves and others, through service and through love. Forgiveness, service, and love. Love, if you ask me, is the thing that is of ultimate worth. Not romantic love, but love as a guiding principle in your life. When Forrest Church was dying of cancer, he thought a lot about ultimate worth. Break your life into 1,000,000 pieces and ask yourself what of any real value might endure after you are gone, he said. The pieces that remain will each carry love's signature. Where do you go for redemption? Church? Maybe. I do think you can find it here if this is a place where you're willing to be honest with yourself. I hope church for you is that kind of place because there's not one of us who at some time in our lives does not need to turn our lives around. That's the problem with categorically prohibiting things like greed and lust and lying. It's why strict religious rules are associated with guilt. It's impossible to be perfect. It's natural that we should struggle with these things from time to time because it's just part of being human. Coming to church should not be guilt-provoking. It shouldn't make us feel that we're not superhuman enough or not good enough. It should be a place where we are the most in touch with our humanness, the most able to wonder at it and laugh at it and roll our eyes at it and celebrate it and not take ourselves too seriously, but then also to make confessions and mid-course corrections and issue apologies and forgive ourselves and others because we do take life seriously, because it is a tremendous gift. The writer and preacher Frederick Buechner says that if we come to church right, we come to it more fully and nakedly ourselves, come with more of our humanness showing than we are apt to come to most places. We come like Moses. He's remembering the part of the Hebrew Bible when Moses is going up the mountain and he sees a burning bush. This is way before the Ten Commandments are issued. Take off your shoes, God tells him. You're standing on holy ground. Buechner says we're like Moses because we come to holy places with muck on our shoes, footsore and travel-stained, with the dust of our lives upon us, our failures, our deceits, our hypocrisies, because if, unlike Moses, we've never taken anybody's life, we have, again and again, withheld from other people, including often even those who are nearest to us, the love that might have made their lives worth living, not to mention our own. Sometimes you have to lose your way in order to find yourself. If you can turn around and see your journey through the lens of transformation and possibility, that's the beginning of redemption. And then we move toward acceptance of what has been, forgiveness of ourselves and others, and a decision to make things right going forward. The writer Wayne Muller writes that in ancient Greek there are two words for time: chronos, which is chronological time, the measurement of minutes and hours and years, and kairos, a sense of time that describes the deeper readiness of things to be born. Kairos is a time when an opening appears and an opportunity for healing, redemption, and forgiveness can occur. In the Unitarian Universalist Church, we believe that everybody is redeemable, lovable, and worthy. Whether you've messed up a little bit or blown it 1,000 times, you're redeemable, lovable, and worthy. Even if your children won't talk to you, or your lover has left you, or you are addicted to something. Whether you come to church every week or once a year, or have just stumbled in for the first time this morning looking for something, maybe you aren't sure what. Redeemable, lovable, worthy. Whether you are unemployed or barely employed, or are the president of your organization, or are retired from something impressive or from something humble but adequate, redeemable, lovable, and worthy. Whether you are tearing up right now or thinking these are all very obvious things for me to say, redeemable, lovable, worthy. We aren't told this often enough. Or if we're told, it's with some kind of catch. Redeemable if you say the right words about Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. Redeemable if you stop loving people of the same gender or start fitting in a box. Redeemable if you make yourself over with the right purse and shoes and laser treatment. Redeemable at a price you cannot afford to pay or can't pay in good conscience. But here, you are redeemable, and that's that. There's no catch, just an invitation to accept, forgive, and serve. There's no shouting or laying on of hands here, though any one of us can offer each other a blessing, and I'll shout one at you if you want. If redemption's going to happen in this place, it's probably something like that burning bush. Light that becomes evident in the context of ordinary things on an ordinary morning, transforming an ordinary dirt path into holy ground. visible perhaps only to the person for whom it is intended, though the rest of us might notice the glow on your face. May it be so. We have a simple closing hymn today. It's printed in your order of service, a blessing to each other.